Okay, hi everybody. Tonight we're starting that 8-week series on codependency, and basically I just want to kind of go over, with you when I get started, some of the ways in which this kind of came about. I'll do an overview of codependency tonight, and then I'll be going to a lot more detail. How I'm going to be doing it is I'll spend 5 sessions just explaining codependency, and then I'll spend 3 to 4 sessions on the recovery process. I'm going to start off tonight, though, by doing the reading from The Language of Letting Go, which is a daily meditation book for codependency. And today was a good one. Spontaneity and fun. Practice being spontaneous. Practice having fun. Many of us have gotten into a rut with rigidity, martyrdom, and deprivation. One of our normal experiences many of us have been deprived of is having fun. Another one is being spontaneous. Do not have the foggiest notion what we'd like to do for fun. We can let ourselves go a little now and then. We can loosen up a bit. We don't have to be so stiff and rigid. We're frightened about being who we are. Take some risks, try some new activities, what we like to do. What might we enjoy doing? Then take another risk. Call a friend, invite them to go out with you. If that person says no, try someone else. Decide to do something, then go through with it. Once, twice, practice having fun until fun becomes fun. Today I will do something just for fun. I will practice having fun until I actually enjoy it. I think one of the beautiful things about that is the repetition concept. But I do want to tell you the story about the series of lectures I'm going to be giving and basically what they're really all about. In 1979, I was given a gift, probably a gift that began to turn my life around. I was given a book called Adult Children of Alcoholics. When I read the book, and especially the traits, characteristics, and especially the laundry list, that book blew me away. I could swear that lady lived in my house. And I realize now, once I began to look at that and get in touch with that, it opened up a door for me, a door to begin a series of lectures and programs that basically helped me tremendously do a lot of personal growing on my own self. And so in the early 80s at Charter Fairmount Hospital in Philadelphia, I began this series on basically a Sunday night. So what I want to do tonight is basically give you an overview of what codependency is, and then I'll go deeper into it as we go along. We define codependency as any person, place, or thing that I have built a dependency on. It means I cannot function without it. That makes my life unmanageable or makes my life crazy. That could be a substance, that could be a person, that could be a situation, that could be a lot of different things. The key is unmanageability and dependency. And so many of us don't realize it. We migrate towards this because codependency is the core root of all addiction. It's the foundation of addiction. And I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. I want to start off by giving you a little bit of theory. I love this because believe it or not, when I studied psychology and I studied the philosophies and stuff to that effect, they actually gave me a process of how life is supposed to be. I don't know if you know this or not, but this is exactly how your life is supposed to go. Remember, I said this is theory, Pat, don't get upset. The concept is from ages 0 to age 10 are referred to as the foundation years. From age 10 up to about 14 are called the transition years. From 14 up to about 20 are referred to as the years of conflict. I have a nickname, I call it the war zone. Believe it or not, you actually are supposed to have a battle with your family called the Battle for Independence. And then from 21 to 26, you are supposed to become a totally independent person. Then from 26 to 120, it's called adulthood. Now, I don't agree with the ages, but I agree with the process. I didn't find out about this, I was in my 40s. So I got a late start, what can I tell you? But the bottom line is the process is what it's really all about. For example, if I could sit you down or a therapist could sit you down and take you through a family history of the first 10 years of your life, we could find out everything about you. Why you act the way you act, why you function the way you function, and why you behave the way you behave. By the time you're 10 years old, all your traits, all your characteristics, everything has been developed. Then it takes about 80 years to work on it after that. But the bottom line is, those foundation years are important. For example, at the moment of your birth, when you come into this world, whether you like it or not, you actually join 5 families. It's almost like these families then become the foundation of your growth. Your blood family, or even a nuclear family, a step family, something to that effect, or some sort of a family system you're born into. You also are born into a neighborhood, a cultural or environment family. For example, I can mention just terms like South Philly, K&A, Kensington. I can mention places like the Midwest. They have a flavor of their own. I joke a lot. I say South Philly is a state of its own. But the bottom line is, it's like a personality traits come out where we're raised as children. You also join a religious family system. I'm sure when I was 1 month old, I didn't go up and down in my crib and say, please baptize me Catholic. My parents took me, placed me into their belief system, which really wasn't mine, but then it did become my normal. But the bottom line is, even if you didn't have a religious system, you still are born into some form of concept and exposure to the religious concept. You also enter into a peer family. You know how tough kids are on kids. And so literally it's about image. It's about belonging, being part. And finally, a society family. Today, especially a society family, basically we're talking now about social media, different ways. Kids being born today are running into a whole different aspect of social media, a whole different exposure to things than many of us weren't exposed to. Back in the 40s when I was born, the only thing we had was a radio. We didn't even have television. You can see how things have come, things have moved, and they're all good. And yet, good can also have negative to it too. Like I said, probably in the near future, there'll be a new 12-step program called Technologies Anonymous. That's coming up next. It's just amazing what we do with dependencies and things to that effect. Understand something which is really important. Everybody on the face of this earth has some forms of dysfunctionality because we're human. Because we're human, we're not perfect. And there are a lot of people who say to me when I'm doing family history, well, I grew up in a perfect family. There were no problems in our family. They were wonderful and they were great. My response to them is, were you raised by robots? Did you program them? So really, in reality, there's no such thing as a perfect family. The humanness is what makes us the unique individuals that we are. And so in growing up in some sort of a dysfunctional family, we pick up some traits and characteristics. I use the example in my own family, kind of bring that out. My mother was the addict in my family. My mother was on prescription drugs. And basically, my mother was also on a lot of no-dose pills back then, which really were amphetamines. My mother literally needed to stay awake because she worked for Camel Soup on the can line. She had to stare at cans all day long. So as a result, then everybody popped no-dose pills to stay awake. The bottom line was my father was Mr. Wonderful, Mr. Fantastic, did everything for everybody. But in reality, when I was born, my mother had me. I always tell this story. My parents were part of an arranged marriage. And 18 years after they were married, I was born. I'm the only child. I have no idea what they did for the first 18 years, but here I am. And so my parents were more like my grandparents. My mother was 40, my father was 48. And so as a reality then, I was raised by older parents. Although in my case, especially my mother, literally latched onto me. So I learned a lot of traits, a lot of characteristics as a child. For example, I got a PhD in fear, guilt, and worry. I was trained in it. I picked up a lot of shame, a lot of abuse. I picked up a lot of things that basically affected me as a child. In short, I didn't have a childhood. There was a lot of emptiness. So at a very early age, I had to learn how to survive. I had to learn how to get through life. And so many of us learned that because I learned to do whatever they told me to do, because I was drilled into that area, especially by the nuns, by the church, by all kinds of things. The thing I'm bringing out is this. There's so many of us, we do our own history and have forms of dysfunctionality in our family system. When we become adults, since we don't really have good foundations, because here's how things are supposed to work. For a little girl, when she's growing up, daddy is supposed to be her first love. Daddy is supposed to be her guide to relationships. For a little boy, it's supposed to be mommy. Mommy's also supposed to be the role model for little girls, and daddy a role model for little boys. Now, of course, that doesn't always take place. So as a result, then literally, we found our own way to survive, our own way to get through life. And so one thing I'm going to share with you what I call the codependency survival traits. Many of us, because we never really got the foundations we were supposed to get, we develop certain survival traits. Those survival traits many times migrate into different forms of addiction. So I'll show you the connection between addiction and codependency. I divide them up into three categories. We either became isolators, where many of us became fantasizers, and many of us became caretakers. Now, many of us actually hit the jackpot and became all three because we adjusted to everything in life. Isolators were normally kids that come out of homes and environments that were empty, lonely. I call them the children of fear, the children of emptiness. These are little kids that basically never got a lot of affection, a lot of hugs. So they're very lonely, very empty, have a lot of fear inside of them. So when they become adults, they usually migrate towards the following addictions. They migrate towards drugs and alcohol, and we call these the functional addicts, which means they function, they get things done because of their emptiness and loneliness. They have a tendency to embalm themselves, to shut off. So we call them the binge addicts, the 5 o'clock addicts, the weekend addicts. These are individuals basically who literally isolate and hide from life. The other addiction that comes along with this are relationship addictions. I'm empty, I'm lonely, I'm scared. And the first person that comes along that treats me nice, I'm going to take that sucker home. It's called hostage taking. We have a mantra. It goes like this. If you truly love someone, let them go. If they're supposed to come back, they'll come back. Codependents and addicts don't believe that. See, their mantra is, if you truly love someone, follow them and stalk them. They try to get away, kill them. We have a whole history of possessiveness and control. So this addiction I'm talking about, relationship addictions, I can make a person into my addiction. And I'm scared to death they're going to leave me. So as a result, literally, what do? I isolate. I try to find somebody. We find it interesting too when it comes to even elements of therapy. Isolators are great hostage takers. See, I'm empty, I'm lonely, I didn't really get what I wanted. So what do? I go to therapy and I hire me a therapist. I'm hiring a parent. The only problem is, like everything else, that sucker better not take a day off. I become dependent on that individual, on that person. And then I get upset when they talk about discharging me, or they talk about leaving me. See, I want to go to them forever and ever and ever. And one time a lady came up to me after I gave these talks, and she said to me, Vince, can you tell me what books to buy so I can bring them to my therapist, so I can teach her about codependency, so she can work with me on codependency? You're going to train your own therapist? I said, why don't you just go to somebody, who basically knows something about codependency? Oh, I can't leave my therapist. I've been with her for 3 years. Oh, no, I can't leave her. So what I'm going to do is, typical codependent, I'm going to buy the books, spend my money. I'm going to then train her and have her work with me. That's a pretty sick statement to come right down to it. And yet that's the crazy stuff that we do. Why? She's dependent on the therapist. Remember the movie, What About Bob? Some of you may remember that movie. Get a chance to watch it. This therapist went on vacation. Next thing you know, her client Bob is knocking on the door. I have a problem. I need to talk to you, but I'm on vacation. But wherever you go, I go. So it's that control thing constantly. The other addiction that comes under this also is what we call workaholism. What I can do very easily, that's a very powerful thing, I can make my job into my life and my identity. We can see this in many different ways, even to the point where a mother can make her job into an identity, which means I don't ever want my kids to grow up. I'm going to run their lives. I'm going to be on top of them forever and ever and ever. I'm even going to predict where they should go to school, who they should marry, back and forth, the whole works. I live my life through my children. Other areas with this isolation is people become so into their job, they can't function without it. We had a big run one time on people going into depressed stage, people being forced into retirement when they were 56 years old. And as a result, then literally, they became totally depressed. They didn't know what to do. What do I do in the morning? Where do I go? How do I function? You took away my identity. See, try not to make a job an identity or a situation an identity. And parents can do that very easily with their children. Their identity becomes centralized around them. I think so many things about isolation is we have a tendency to give ourselves up and take other people hostage and fill our void inside of us. The other addiction under isolation, we don't talk about it too much, is anorexia. Anorexics are normally, 80% of all anorexics are normally female, and they literally have daddy issues. And so many times it comes down to the fact with anorexic, I don't want to grow up. So if I really starve myself and close myself down, then somebody's always got to take care of me. I can revert right back into being a child again. What's scary about this disease, when you shut your body down, it's very difficult to start it again. And that's why sometimes they gotta even go in the hospitals and things of that effect. It's scary. The human mind does some crazy things. 4 years ago, I buried a lady that suffered from anorexia. When I did her funeral, she was 52 years old and she was down to 58 pounds when she died. Literally, it's never enough. And in my own life, I realized this because I started out as a compulsive overeater when I got into my recovery, and I got addicted to losing weight. I went down to 145 pounds. I look like crap. My nutritionist made me come back up to 190 and 195. I hated her because I got so excited about losing weight. It's almost like an addiction. And we see this in our society today, too. It's a big part of it. So it's all interconnected. The second area is fantasy. These are normally kids that grew up in homes that have experienced major, major traumas. Kids that are sexually abused, kids that have secrets, kids that grew up in homes where basically they don't want to take anybody home anymore. They're embarrassed by their families. A lot of mental health issues, a lot of craziness, a lot of insanity. And as a result, then what do? At a very early age, because of the embarrassment of my family, because of my secrets, I then have a tendency to make up stories. I believe my own stories. It's my survival piece. I remember a little girl in third grade. The teacher said to her one day, "How come your parents don't come to the PTA meetings?" She actually said with a straight face, "My father was a Secret Service agent. He's not allowed to go out in public." Her father was a drunk. Her father was an abuser. Her father was insane and crazy. But see, she made daddy into this wonderful person so I can portray him to everybody. These are the kids that never take anybody home. They're embarrassed by their families. Or these are the kids that always want to be over somebody else's house. It's avoidance. When they grow up, many times, unfortunately, they migrate towards what we call the fantasy addictions. See, they're used to abuse. So they migrate towards addictions. For example, they migrate towards drugs and alcohol, but these are the unmanageable drug addicts and alcoholics. These are the ones whose lives are totally insane. At the same time, if you confront them, they say, "Not me. I don't have a problem. You got the problem." I put it on everybody else. So fantasizers do a lot of blaming. Why are you out to get me? I remember when I was running Starting Point in South Philadelphia, when it was a halfway house for street alcoholics. I walked past the bar one day down the street from us. The bar door was open. It was summertime. And there was a guy sitting at the bar who just had been in our halfway house. And I didn't say a word to him. I just kept walking. He came running out of the bar, screaming at me in the middle of 23rd Street. "Father, I'm not drinking." He was so quick to run out, he carried the shot glass out with him. And when he looked at me, he put it in his pocket. You tell me how many normal drinkers run out of buildings and scream, "I'm not drinking," and put an open shot glass of whiskey in their pocket? I don't think so. But see what shame does to you? The minute I saw him, shame kicked in. And for a fantasy addict, especially drug addicts and alcoholics, they live two lives. They're almost like multiples in a way. As soon as the shame kicks in, they go into that life of denial. The bottom line is, it's hard for us to believe, even though they might be right in front of you, totally unmanageable. They literally believe they're not using when they're using. It's hard for us to believe, I know that. But the psyche does that to people. And then right away, they have to blame somebody else, yell at somebody else. The second addiction, the scariest of all addictions, is called sex addiction. See, fantasy addicts don't know how to have relationships. They either have clandestine relationships, get into sexual deviant behavior, because this stuff is all normal to them. Many who are abused become abusers, or they end up getting abused because abuse has become their normal. And so as a result, very many times, these types of individuals literally are in situations where literally they try to keep this stuff secret, but it doesn't work. I'll give you two good examples of this. They're very sad, but they're true. A couple that live in California. The husband was an attorney, made a lot of money, 3 figures. His wife was a pillar of the community. PTA, school functions, they had 3 beautiful kids. They almost had the life everybody was supposed to have. But his wife had a secret. 18 hours a week, she was a very expensive call girl. She lived 2 different lives. And the husband had no idea at all what was going on. He had normal relations with her and everything else. Not the slightest idea. Until one time, one of the persons she was with ended up being a cop. She got arrested. It brought scandal to the entire family. He ended up losing many of his clients in his law firm. Everything fell apart in the whole entire family. They had to move from California to the East Coast after she went through her case and literally got into treatment. And thanks for the grace of God, they're both doing good today. But took a long haul, a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of craziness. An even scarier one, we see this a lot of times with fantasy addicts. I live in a fantasy world. I can't live in reality. So what do? I create my own fantasy. Here's another true story. A young lady who had a job working for a boss. She was administrative secretary, and she literally fell in love with her boss. Totally fell in love with him. Now, of course, she never told him that. Here's the fantasy. Here's how fantasizers think. From 9 to 5 every day, 5 days a week, he belongs to me. What he does after 5 o'clock, I don't want to know. This gentleman was married and had 3 kids. But as far as she's concerned, he wasn't married and didn't have kids. He was hers. The wife would call up and she sabotaged the phone calls. She manipulated everything. And one day, his wife, or she looks at him, the other woman, showed up to take her husband out to lunch by surprise. When they went out to lunch, she went totally off the deep end. She ended up destroying the office, cutting up chairs, throwing stuff around, screaming, yelling. The rage that came out of her. That rage wasn't towards her fantasy. That goes way back into her childhood. That stuff was pent up inside of her for a long period of time, but it came out. They ended up with the police. They had to strap her and take her to a psychiatric hospital. She went through treatment for a lot of years, and still is working on herself today. But it's scary. Now, fantasy addictions are powerful because they're up here. And we live in this make-believe world. It's about how I look on the outside, not on the inside. Workaholism is another one. I'll give you a good example of that to bring it out real closely. These are individuals, fantasy addicts, that love to work in jobs that are doomed to failure. You know, a lady one time brought this gentleman in to see me. It was her husband. Of course, when they bring the husbands in, they have a ball and chain around their leg as she drags him in. Anyway, she said to me, I want you to explain something to this man, please. We have a trucking company. He is the only employee, but we have 2 trucks. He got up and yelled at her and screamed at her. I go to work 4:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. I bring in over $2,800 every week to this family. She brought the books with her and she said, yes, but we spend $4,200 a week. We got a problem. He actually stood up and yelled and screamed at her and said, I don't know what the lady does. I don't know what the bitch does with our money. It's her fault. Things are the way they are. See, we look at the fantasy concept. Whenever a fantasy addict is confronted, then basically they have to be able to literally experience that concept. So they have to blame somebody else to keep it off of them. Let's go down to the caretakers now. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one more addiction in fantasy. Under eating disorders, we call that bulimia. These are, you know, when you look at bulimics, they almost look normal. They do a lot of binging, a lot of purging, it's all secrets. Everything's behind. They abuse themselves like crazy, but to the outside, they look okay. So remember, the fantasy person is somebody who comes out of abuse and then turns the abuse on themselves or on others. The third area is called caretaking. Now, if you want me to, I can stay here till midnight tonight and talk about caretakers. Believe me, it's my forte. These are the goody two-shoes kids. The kids that don't have a childhood. These are the kids that go from 3 to 43. The responsible children, the responsible kids. As a result of very early age, they take on a lot of responsibility, but they smile a lot. If you ask them how they are, caretakers always say, I'm fine, F-I-N-E. I'm frustrated, emotional, neurotic, and emotional. Congratulations, I'm fine. But watch what caretakers do. They're so used to taking care of something, but deep down inside, they're angry because they have to. So we see this in nurses, teachers, social workers, mothers, basically people that work in the service-based industries. They're always doing for others, but never take care of themselves. They're always on duty. I joke a lot about this when it comes to the workaholism of caretakers. But caretakers are individuals that literally beat themselves into the ground. Giving. I'll give an example of this. Let me find somebody good here. Okay. All right. We'll work on Saul tonight. Saul, you want to make a lot of money? I'll tell you what we'll do. Okay. Now, I want you to start your own business, okay? And if you start your business and you need 15 workers, hire 3 caretakers. Because each one will do the work of 5 people, not a problem. But they're going to have rules and regulations. First of all, what you have to do is don't show up at all for your company. Just give them total control of it. Let them run it. Because believe me, they'll do a fantastic job. Secondly, they're going to bitch about you, gripe about you, and complain about you all week long. But don't worry about it. They'll never do anything about it. If they have to say overtime, don't pay them anything for overtime. They'll take it anyway. They'll do it. The most important thing of all is don't pay them too much. They can't handle that. See, they're so used to this concept. They drive themselves like crazy. They push themselves. They never take a day off. If you had a 2-foot snowstorm, your building will be open. Don't worry about it. They'll be there. They have this dedication. It's unbelievable. At the same time, though, they're frustrated, they're angry, and they want to have control. Control is a big thing. Now, here's the funniest part. Suppose one of these wonderful caretakers decides they want to call out sick when they're not sick. They don't normally do this, but if they do choose to do it, it's an adventure. If you happen to live with somebody who's like this, and they're going to call out sick the next day, get a motel room, because they're going to stay up all night working on their story. They can tell the people the next day why they're not going to come in, even though it's not a true story. They're going to have the guilt and anxiety and everything else all night long. Then the next day, 7 o'clock comes, they got to make that phone call. They got their story ready. They call up the person on the other end, just finished the shift. They could care less. You're not coming in? Okay, boom, they'll hang up. They hung up on me. I never got to tell them my story. Now I got a problem. I have to work the rest of the day on this story, make sure I got a good one when I go in tomorrow. But here's the other part of it. Maybe I better stay in the house all day, because I did call out sick. So if somebody sees me, they're going to talk. So you should have just went to work. It'd be a lot easier. The next day, they go into work with this thing that could be published by now called a story. And you know what kills caretakers most of all? Nobody even knew they were out for the day. That destroys a caretaker. Then they got to run around the company all day because they feel guilty, telling people their story, even though people don't want to hear their story. But they'll tell you anyway. The guilt is unbelievable. They're driven. The last thing, Sal, is remember, just stop in on Friday and pick up your money. That's all you got to do. Takes care of that business. That one works. The one good thing about caretakers, they push and drive themselves, but they have no sense of their worth. And I'll tell you a personal story. I get a lot of phone calls from people who do workshops and different things. So the VA hospital called me up and they asked me to do a training for their staff. I said, sure. Then they asked me that question, what's your fee? Of course, I get embarrassed and I say, well, whatever you normally pay, that's fine. I did the workshop. When I was done, they gave me an envelope. Now I'm a good codependent. I don't want people to see me taking the envelope. So right away, I stuck it in my pocket. Got out in the car, opened it up. It was a check for $750. Do you know I felt guilty? I actually went back in and asked the guy if they had made a mistake. The guy looked at me like I had 10 heads. He said, you told me to give you the normal fee. You mean I can keep it? On the way home, here's a typical guilt of a caretaker. On the way home, I thought, well, maybe I better donate part of it. Maybe I'll just keep so much of it and donate the rest of it. God forbid you earned it, keep it. But see how guilt and stuff kick in? They're driven. And the same thing with caretakers when they get caught up in addiction. You know, the one good thing about caretakers, they only go to the legal pushers. They're called doctors, by the way. They basically do everything on the up and up. They medicate themselves a lot because they repress that anger, they repress that frustration inside of them. The other area are the caretaker love addicts. These are individuals who love to get involved in relationships with sickies. The sicker, the better. Bring me your sick and you're deprived, and I will take care of them, and I will fix them. Here's the rules again. Don't you dare get better. Because I can bitch about you, gripe about you, and complain about you all day long. You're an outlet for my feelings and my anger. And as a result, then literally, I need to control you. I remember years ago, I used to go to an Al-Anon meeting at the South Philly Clubhouse on Friday night. We had this lady who came to the meeting every week. All she did was bitch about her husband, the alcoholic. She would call him names, everything, terrible man he was, everything, the whole works. Well, down the road, you know what her husband did? He had the audacity to get sober. Then she came to the Al-Anon meeting and bitched because he went to too many damn AA meetings now. See, once he was no good, now he goes to too many meetings. So, and unbelievable. But see, she needs to find something wrong. It's the griping, the complaining, the anger, the frustration that comes out of people. And a lot of this goes back to the fact of, basically, goes back to your childhood. The last addiction that comes under is compulsive overeating. Many, many caretakers, and many of them become compulsive overeaters because we don't take care of our bodies. We're so busy doing things for everybody else, we don't take care of us. And as a result, we find ourselves, with the junk food, stuff to that effect. But believe it or not, most compulsive overeaters have a lot of repressed anger, inside of them. And believe me, if you repress anger, it comes out sideways. And I'm speaking from experience. I never knew how much rage and anger I had inside of me, stuff I carried for a long period of time. And it's amazing. At the same time, we have body image problems because we put something around us to avoid intimacy, to avoid closeness, to avoid a lot of different things in the course of life. So what do? Do a lot of blaming. The anger comes out in blaming form to a lot of different people. I shared all these things about codependency because this is an overview of the traits and characteristics. What I want to do is spend some time next week talking just about family systems and how they affect you. I also want to spend the third week talking about how to play and how to have fun. A lot of codependents don't know how to do that. We're too busy either saving the world or at the same time doing some crazy thing somewhere. The fourth week, we'll talk about codependency and relationships. And then we'll talk about the roles that codependents play. And then in the last 3 weeks and 4 weeks, I'll cover the recovery process and how it works. I want to go into a lot of detail with this because I truly believe it is the core root, the foundation of everything that we're connected with. It's such core root for me, and I know how much it means to me, that I have all these things recorded. They're on the YouTube channel on the Vince's Corner. And also, basically, I actually published a book with this whole process involved in it. That's how much I believe in it that deeply. I hope this gives you kind of an overview of codependency, the foundations, the basics, and then we'll get into a lot more detail as we get into the weeks. So I want to say a prayer tonight and just ask the higher power to guide us and be with us on our journey together. Let us pray. God, the God of our understanding, our divine presence, we come before you and say thank you. Thank you for the gift of our life. Help us to be able to heal and forgive our past and our history. Help us to be open to grow and learn. Teach us the willingness to grow, the willingness to change, the willingness to be able to look at things in a positive way. Teach us to learn from our history, but teach us not to be afraid to face our history. Teach us to heal, to learn, to grow. And teach us that we're here on this earth for a journey. Teach us to be able to celebrate who we are, to celebrate our lives, and celebrate the gift that you're given to each and every one of us. So we come together as a family, we say thank you. We say thank you in prayer, in gratitude, say thank you in love. So we pray and ask for your guidance, your direction, each and every day of our life. And we ask this in your name. Amen.